It's another episode of the J.S Podcast. Welcome back, everyone. I actually want to talk about something that I've did this week. It's not gonna be like a conspiracy or a mystery, but it's definitely very creepy to say the least, and just something really that I found interesting over the week to research and to talk about, because I could definitely keep the format of this particular episode definitely less formal, and I want to test out that type of a format for this podcast. So hopefully you guys enjoy, and we're talking about none other than the Žaliakalnis Jewish cemetery that is in Kaunas. Žaliakalnis is basically a district of my city. I live in the city of Kaunas. It's the second largest city in Lithuania. So if anyone from the Solvable Mysteries podcast wants to actually know a little bit more about myself, well, there's a little bit of information for you guys right there. Now, why I want to talk about the cemeteries, because I actually went to the cemetery over the weekend. Yeah, I definitely did. So I think I went there on Sunday pretty much, and it's I mean I'm pretty sure in the visual assets that you can find on my YouTube channel, you could pretty much see what I'm talking about. The scene is really eerie, and I think it sort of correlates with what the topics are on this podcast as well. One other thing to mention, now that I'm listening back to the beginning of this episode, is that I actually have like a sore throat a little bit, but because I think I have like a cold or something like that. Maybe it's actually COVID or something like that, but I don't really feel that bad. It's just that my voice is really messed up right now, and I think I also have like a runny nose as well. So that's actually quite unfortunate. I hope that my voice doesn't sort of put you guys away right now or something like that. And with that being said, I think it's just about time for us to get into the actual episode and to the topic. So there are actually four Jewish cemeteries of the Lithuanian Jews living in Kaunas, and out of those four cemeteries, only one is actually still active. One is completely abandoned, and it has a really creepy and spooky vibe. It's the one that I went to over the weekend, and one, it has been destroyed completely. And right now, when you look at that one on the Google Maps and things like that, on the street view, you actually only see like some old taverns. So I'm not really sure where the I think they just built over the graves. And then one is actually really mysterious, because there's supposed to be like one right next to the river. I believe the river of Neris, or maybe Nemunas, one of those two rivers. And it's actually a place that I used to pass every single day when I was going to school. And it's just an area where there is this I guess gas station, but apparently somewhere around this particular gas station there's supposed to be like three Jewish graves. I don't really know where those are at, but it's definitely something interesting to think about, and I'll definitely try to locate these graves the next time I'm around in that general area, which since I'm not going to school anymore, I don't really go there that often. So the oldest Jewish cemetery is in Vilijampolė, and it was destroyed by the Soviet Union authorities after the Second World War. Now this is the one where you can only see like those taverns on the Google Maps on the street view. Now, the second largest cemetery is in the residential area of Žaliakalnis, which, as I've said, it's probably like the poshiest, the most fancy to some degree, I would say, district of Kaunas. Well, obviously in every single district you have like really old school Soviet Union buildings. They just look disgusting, so you can't really say that any area in my city is that posh. Basically, probably just the city center that has a lot of cool interwar period architecture. But other than that, I would say that Žaliakalnis would be considered the most poshiest place ever, and in the heart of that, I would say district, there is this just completely abandoned Jewish cemetery. And I'm sure from the visuals that you are seeing right now, you definitely agree with me. I took these videos, I think on Sunday, so they're still pretty fresh. It's winter. There's some snow. My hands were definitely freezing. No one was actually present. It was only me and whoever I was traveling with. I was with one other person. No one was there actually. And when you're actually alone in the cemetery, when no one is there, it really gets to some degree really spooky. And I think a lot of people are into that type of stuff. For me, it's more about like just seeing the devastation, and I guess the state of the cemetery. It's definitely a really sad thing to see, for sure. Now, among others, the rabbi of Kovno, basically Kovno is how the Polish, because Lithuania has like a neighboring country to the west, which is Poland, and we have like a really interesting history where the average Lithuanian probably doesn't really like the Polish all that much. Well, the new generation, they don't care, but the older generation, they don't really like the Polish. They don't like anyone actually, for that matter. But Kovno is how they would pronounce the Lithuanian city of Kaunas, and so the rabbi of Kovno and the head of Kovno, Kolel Yitzhak Elchan Spector, was buried in Žaliakalnis Jewish cemetery. So, probably the highest ranking member, or, the highest ranking theologian from the Jewish faith in the city was buried in this abandoned, run down, really sad looking cemetery. And when I say sad, I really do mean sad. When I was walking there, I always feel sad, for some reason, because I've been here 3 times, I believe, in my life, and every single time I come here, I'm always feeling like a sort of a saddening feeling, to some degree. Before we get into some more interesting details about this cemetery, I want to mention the other 2 cemeteries that I have not yet talked about. So the third cemetery is located in the Panemune district of the left bank of the Nemunas River, and only 3 gravestones are visible in this cemetery. Honest to God, I have no idea where this cemetery is located. As I've said, I would pass here every single day, at least 2 times a day when I was going to school. Well, I would pass either in a car or a school bus, so I wouldn't really pay that much attention. But the next time I'm in this area, I'm definitely will try to locate those 3 gravestones, because I feel like because this is the information that I found on Wikipedia, and apparently on Google Maps you can also find, on Google Maps, these gravestones, this grave site is also mapped. So I'm really curious. Maybe somewhere right next to the gas station, potentially. I think it's a really interesting situation how they built a gas station right on top of a Jewish cemetery. That's definitely a messed up thing to do, if that was the case, in my opinion. And then the fourth and still active Jewish cemetery is located in another district of the city called Aleksotas, and it's near the Nemunas River as well, because pretty much everything is near that freaking river in this city. And I'm looking at the pictures of this particular cemetery, and it's definitely not it's not the nicest looking cemetery in the world. But let's remember, right now the Jewish population in Lithuania is somewhere around 3,000 people. That's the numbers that I found. So, and personally, I've seen like a Jew in Lithuania like maybe once in my life. So the cemetery definitely doesn't have to be that big or that fancy, because let's remember that there's that not that many Jewish people in my country, and the reason for that is really tragic, actually, and we will be getting into all of that in this podcast. So the cemetery that I've been to, and I hopefully my voice is now getting a little bit better. I've got something to drink, so hopefully that helps out with the voice, and you may end up enjoying this podcast a lot more. So this cemetery that I've been to was established in 1861. So quite back in the day. Now, one of the main reasons why this cemetery was actually built, this is some crazy stuff. I had to actually dig for this, guys. Um, this is gonna be crazy. One of the main reasons why the second cemetery was built, because it's the second one. The first one is that Williampole cemetery that now has like only like taverns on top of it or something like that. So that was the main cemetery for the longest time for the Jewish population. Now, why this one in Žaliakalnis was actually built? Because let's remember that pesky little river called Nemunas. Well, Vilijampolė and Žaliakalnis are two districts that are separated by this river. Now, this river was apparently flooding a lot back in the day, and I found this information that in the 19th century, several times people have failed to transport, the dead Jews, pretty much, the bodies of Jews that have passed away to the Williampole cemetery that you would have to get to, by, I guess, crossing the river. Now, when that river flooded, they failed at least several times to transport the dead bodies to the cemetery in Williampole. I swear to God, I looked into what that means. I didn't find out what that means. I'm assuming that those potential bodies have drowned, or maybe they were like yeah, they had to be in bodies. So I don't know, this could be crazy. There could be some dead bodies in the back of the Nemunas river, which would be just the craziest thing in the world, to be honest, because I believe I was swimming there once. So, the cemetery being in the poshiest area of the city actually served a purpose. It was an easier way to, have the ceremonies and to transport, the dead bodies of people who have passed away to the cemetery that is closer than, to the other one that you would have to pass through the Nemunas River to get to. Now, the other thing is that during the Soviet era, this cemetery was completely abandoned. Now, the Soviet era is when Lithuania got taken over by the Soviet Union, and I won't be getting into that because that's a whole nother history lesson for you guys. So, during the Soviet Union times in Lithuania, stone monuments were stolen, mausoleums were demolished, tombstones were used, rubbish was poured. But in 1998, because I believe in 91 we gained our independence once again. I'm not definitely into Lithuanian history because it's really boring. So I'm not real certain if it was in the 1990 or 91. But somewhere around that time we gained our independence back, and then in 98 this particular cemetery, the one that I've been to, the abandoned one, it was actually included in the register of invaluable cultural property of the Republic of Lithuania. Now, guys, tell me, do you think that this cemetery looks like a well appreciated cultural area, by the Lithuanian populace? Because it definitely isn't. It really saddens me that it's not, because we'll get into the Lithuanians, because I know I'm a Lithuanian, but I have a bone to pick with these Lithuanians. If you see a Lithuanian, be wary. Lithuanians are very dangerous. A big part of the monuments that have survived in this cemetery, well, those are of buried Jewish volunteers. Many of these Jews fought in the struggle for Lithuania's independence, and actually, Lithuanian president way back in the day, I believe he was the first Lithuanian president ever, Antanas Smetona. I really like that guy because he was a gangster. Like, he was a complete mafia guy. He just had that swag, that mafia swag. So I'm definitely liking Smetona. I might end up doing an episode on him one day. Now, this president, he actually spoke about the contribution of Jewish soldiers to the defense of the Lithuanian independence. So I'm definitely saluting both the gangster Smetona president as well as the Jews. Thank you a lot for fighting for the independence of Lithuania. And this is exactly where this podcast turns very, very dark, very sick right now. Victims of the famous here in Lithuania, it's a famous torture event. It happened in Lietukis garage. You know, the victims of that torture, which were around 50 Jews that were tortured and killed savagely by Lithuanians. As I've said, Lithuanians are very dangerous. Now, these victims may have been buried in this same cemetery that you are seeing right now in the visuals that I have been to this weekend. Now, that's crazy. Now, the Lietukis garage murders, torture, murders, the horrible, horrible things that the Lithuanians have done, the horrible, unspeakable things that happened in that garage. And in the place of that garage, actually, right now, my brother's school is at. Well, my brother is older than me. He finished school like 10 years ago, but he went to school there. So that those garage murders were so crazy. I may end up doing an episode on that, because that's one of the darkest things that Lithuanians have ever came up with, to those 50 Jews. I might do an episode on that one day, because Lithuanians, they really out here, doing horrible stuff, especially back in the day. Now, these people may be buried in this cemetery that I've been to. Interesting fact, very interesting fact, that investigation was launched during the Soviet era to find out whether or not, they were actually buried in that cemetery. It was never completed. I think it's insane. I think the whole story about this garage murders were insane. I need to come back here one day, but I don't know, guys. I think it might be too dark for you guys. That's just some sick stuff that, the Lithuanians have done. And also in this Žaliakalnis Jewish cemetery that I've been to, there is a plot of land that has just like grass on it. No tombstones, no nothing, just grass. And in that particular area, people are assuming that, the victims of the Lietukis garage, savage murders by the Lithuanians, may be buried. I think it would be really interesting to find out how definitely, if any high-ranking Jewish members of the Jewish society, I really respect Jews. Like, Jews are they're really smart, and I really like, I would like to meet some really smart Jews one day as well, and become friends and things like that. If some if some high-ranking Jewish members of like the high society Jewish life somewhere want to fund this investigation, I could definitely be a coordinator of this particular research event. I could definitely try to find out, maybe like schedule some excavators or something like that in the area, just to find out, because I'm also very curious, and I think it's a part of history that needs to be looked at once more, and we need to find out the truth. Now, I promised that I would not embezzle any money. I would, honest to God, hope to die. I would not embezzle a single cent from this. Because if you're gonna do business here in Lithuania, you could expect at least 20% of the funds going into certain investments to be embezzled by the local shady Lithuanians. Shady Lithuanians. But I promise I would not embezzle a single cent, and I would work tirelessly to get to the bottom of this mystery. In addition to the Jewish soldiers who took part in the struggle for Lithuanian independence, a number of famous pre-war public and cultural figures, only some of the tombs are actually known of these figures, are also buried in the Žaliakalnis cemetery. Now, some of them are, I have a little list here. I really want to read this list because I think by complete accident I may have seen one of these people's graves. Now, there's a person buried named Danielius Dolskis. He was an interwar Lithuanian pop singer. Now, when I'm talking about pop, interwar pop, I'm not talking about One Direction, Justin Bieber. I'm talking about a whole nother thing that maybe deserves a whole episode. We have Israel Elishev, who was a literacy critic. He probably read various literature and critiqued it or praised it. I'm assuming that's what literary critics do. We have Shancho Grishovich Abramson, who was a deputy of the Second State Duma of the Russian Empire. Now, the Russian Duma, as you know, is pretty much the Russian parliament. Now, this guy, I believe I've seen his grave by complete accident. His name is Ozeri Filkenstein. Now, he was the chairman of the Lithuanian Jewish People's Party, and he was member of the Seimas. Seimas is the Lithuanian parliament. And yeah, I definitely remember seeing a grave that said Finkelstein, and I'm not really certain. Maybe it was not from Ozeris Filkenstein. Maybe it was someone from his family. Maybe his entire family was buried there. Unfortunately, I did not know about this list of people before I actually went and traveled to the cemetery. Now, we have a man named Israel Kumeri, a journalist for the newspaper The Jewish Life and Jewish World. We have Yaakov Lifshitz, who was a writer, another writer called Joseph Livshin, Jacob Massenblum, who was an artist. I don't really know what kind of an artist actually. And then lastly, we have another writer named Chaimas Rafalevichus. So, a whole lot of influential Jewish people from the city have been, buried there. And I would say the people that I have mentioned, I believe 8 people that I've just mentioned, their achievements in life probably top that of the whole entire Lithuanian populace at that time, because Jewish people were definitely a lot smarter than the local Lithuanians. I can assure you guys that's the case. So the introductory part of this episode into, I guess the Jewish community in my city, and basically the 4 cemeteries of the Jewish population in my city of Kaunas have been done. Let's talk a little bit about my trip to the abandoned cemetery, and the history of how I ended up going there in the first place. Now, Back in the day, I believe in late 2000, just in 2018 or 19, I'm not really that good with years anymore. I was working at the worst job in the city. I was working in a call center for a local, I don't know, like a tech supplier, like a place that sold like phones, dishers, fridges, and things like that. So that was a really horrible time in my life. I didn't really have any money, because now I'm rolling in money. Like I'm doing really good right now, in my personal life. Like I have a lot of money nowadays. But back in the day, I wasn't really doing that well. Back in the day, like literally last year. But basically, I was doing the worst job in the city, and the only thing that kept me sane was pretty much doing a walk across the city center-ish area, I would say, where the offices were located for that company. Because after like talking to like stupid Lithuanian peasants that don't know how to use their mobile phone properly, and they all of a sudden start calling my office for help. The only thing that kept me sane are these walks. Now, one of the locations that I would often pass during these lunch break walks, because I wasn't eating lunch, because I don't know, man, I just didn't felt like eating lunch at that point. One of the areas that I would walk past is this particular Jewish cemetery. And it never dawned to me to go inside of it, because, when you approach this abandoned Žaliakalnis cemetery, it's definitely not inviting. You have like cardboards saying, police is watching this. Don't go here, don't do this, no dogs, no music, and no something else. I don't remember, but you can definitely take pictures, so and video the whole place. So I wasn't breaking the law here. Now, one other thing to mention here is that one of the days I was walking past, I actually decided to go inside of it. I went in there, and I won't lie, it like sort of changed me for like a week, for like a good week. I was like, wow, this job that I'm doing doesn't matter. There's like a lot more important things out there. Like this Jewish cemetery is completely abandoned. The Lietukis torture victims could be potentially buried here. No one is interested in finding out. All of these people that I work with at the office are retarded. They don't care about anything. They just do their little stupid job, and they're just good with like spending their time at the office just doing their stupid job. Come lunchtime, I'm gonna eat something. They don't give a damn. I was like, wow, this doesn't matter. So I walked outside of that cemetery. I was like, wow, nothing matters. I'm gonna be doing good next year. And so I am. I'm doing good right now. Financially, I'm really good. Like I got a whole lot of racks in my bank account right now. I have a nice car, things like that. But back then I was like literally last year, I was broke, but I was like, yo, this doesn't matter. Like the scene of this abandoned Jewish cemetery just made me feel like, yo, there's more to life. There's like dark stuff happening all over the place. I can't live a closed life where I don't really see anything besides this stupid job and talking to the stupid Lithuanian peasants. I had to like change something. Well, obviously I quit the job, I got another job. I made some good financial moves. I'm really good right now. Like I'm really doing good right now. I got a whole bunch of money. But then, I think just going inside of that cemetery changed me. And now, I sort of try to go back there every now and then, because it's just so real when you get there. All of these abandoned graves is like literally part of history, and none of these stupid Lithuanian peasants are interested in it, and you're like, you just feel a lot when you go in there. You start feeling a lot better about yourself, and you start feeling a lot better than the other stupid Lithuanian peasants, because you're like, yo, these people don't care. So they could like go to hell, and you're about to get this money. I know this probably didn't make any sense, and I'm well aware that this didn't make any sense, but that's pretty much how I ended up going there in the first place. So I also want to talk a little bit about the Jewish people in Lithuania. The Jews began living in Lithuania as early as in the 13th century. Now, wrap your head around that. That's way, way, way back before the United States were formed, because I'm assuming a lot of the people that will be listening to this podcast eventually will be from the United States. So I'm talking about like really, really ancient times at this point. Now, in 1388, they were granted a charter by Vytautas, who was a big boy boss back in the day in Lithuania. Under this charter, the Jewish population formed a class of freemen subject in all criminal cases directly to the jurisdiction of the Grand Duke, which was Vytautas at that point, and his official representatives, and in petty suits to the jurisdiction of local officials on an equal footing with the lesser nobles, the Šlachtas, boyars, and other free citizens. So basically, the Jews were granted very, very, very similar rights to everyone else, in the country way back in the day. Now, the country looked a whole lot different than modern day Lithuania. It was like the biggest country in Europe at certain points. Now, as a result of these very similar laws that were granted by the Grand Duke Vytautas, the Jewish community prospered. They became, high-ranking members of the Lithuanian society, and I will actually add that the Jewish members always did the best jobs in the country. They were the most respected, or like one of the most respected factions in the country, and they were always renowned for their high intelligence, their work ethic, their unique and very interesting traditions, as opposed to the fairly stupid local Lithuanian population. One very important fact to mention about the Jewish people in most of Eastern Europe, and I'm assuming Western Europe. I'm not a historian, so I pardon me if I get this wrong, but I definitely know that this was the case for Lithuania. Basically, the Jewish people that lived in Lithuania, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, this really massive country back in the day, they actually couldn't own any land. They weren't allowed to work land because, the land was supposed to be owned only by like certain ethnic groups, and Jewish people were not allowed to own land. And pretty much, what do you do when you own land? You work that land. You become a dirty farmer, pretty much. Now, what the Jews couldn't actually do, they couldn't work this land, so they started businesses. They ran vodka plants, like booze plants, because the local Lithuanians, they want to get drunk, but they're not smart enough to run these plants. So that's where the Jews came in. They ran banks, money lending operations, stores, and basically at the end of the day, now I'm talking about like more recent times, let's say 19th century, early 20th century. This made the main city populations only for the Jewish. So envision this, guys. Lithuanian people living in Lithuania only lived in farms, and the Jewish population lived in the cities. And I assume a slight amount of a hatred towards the Jewish population came from this, because the Jews were like the rich, or like the well-off, smart, intelligent, well-educated bankers, clergymen, all of that, had stores, things like that, like real businesses, while most of Lithuanians had to work the fields. because they're just like simple people at the end of the day, compared to the Jews. And moving forward, into the darker history of Europe now. Before the Second World War, actually, the Lithuanian Jewish population was around 160,000 people, so around 7% of the total Lithuanian population. Vilnius, the Lithuanian capital, not Kaunas, but Vilnius, had a Jewish community of nearly 100,000 people. So that was actually about 45% of the city's total population. So half of the Lithuanian capital was inhabited by Jewish people, pretty much. Now, we would be a very good country, I assume, if we still had a 7% Jewish population, but unfortunately we don't. And that's because, from June to December of the year 1941, the Lithuanian Holocaust, well, I would say the Holocaust in Lithuania had happened. The Holocaust in Lithuania has resulted in, the near total destruction of Lithuanian Jews living in Nazi-controlled Reich Commissariat Ostland, which is pretty much, the occupied Baltic states, the Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. They were called Ostland back in the day by, the Nazi Germany. Out of approximately around 210,000 Jews living in Lithuania, an estimated of 195,000 were murdered before the end of the Second World War, most between June and December of 1941, so during the Holocaust time. More than 95% of Lithuania's Jewish population was massacred over the 3-year German occupation. It was a more complete destruction of the Jewish population than in any other country affected by the Holocaust. At one point, Lithuanians were so efficient in murdering the Jewish population that they were actually sent, obviously not all of the Lithuanians. I'm not gonna say that everyone was supporting it. There was a lot of people who were trying to save Jews. They were sort of hiding them, risking their own lives and things like that. But the, I guess, paramilitaries that sort of were, at the forefront of the destruction of the Jewish population in Lithuania, they were so efficient at destroying Jews that they were actually sent to Belarus, a neighboring country, to help out in their Holocaust operations. So the Lithuanians, there's a huge amount of Lithuanians who are just like dark, envious people, you know what I mean? An important component to the Holocaust in Lithuania was that the occupying Nazi German administration actually fanned antisemitism by blaming the Soviet regime's recent annexation of Lithuania a year earlier to the Jewish community. As of 2020, the topic of the Holocaust in Lithuania and the role played by Lithuanians in the genocide of, the Lithuanian Jews, including several notable Lithuanian nationalists, remain controversial. They're saying that, things were not as bad as everyone says they were. I'm definitely sure that, things are just as bad as they sound at this point. Another interesting fact that I just have to mention when I'm talking about these, controversial topics is that the German invasion of the Soviet Union on the 22nd of June in 1941 came after a year of Soviet occupation. So, the year prior to that, Lithuania was actually occupied by the Soviet Union. And now that occupation had culminated in a mass deportation across the Baltics only a week, only 1 week before the German invasion. Now, these deportations, you know, in Lithuania, when you learn history, the history teachers are always like saying, "Oh, the deportations that, deportations this." How like Lithuanians were like deported to Siberia, like the people that were like trying to stand up against the Soviet Union. They were deported to Siberia. All the smart people deported to Siberia. Yeah, that's a bad thing. Obviously, we don't like that. But why don't these history teachers ever mention the fact that literally right after that, the Lithuanians became the perfect Jew killing machines? Why are we not talking about this? Like the stupid Lithuanian history teachers, like they should get like a unanimous, like a smack in the head, you know what I mean? So basically, after um these massive deportations of the Lithuanians who were of a threat to the Soviet Union at that point, the Nazis were actually welcomed as liberators and received support from Lithuania's irregular militia against retreating Soviet forces. Many Lithuanians actually believed that Germany would allow the re-establishment of the country's independence. In order to appease the Germans, some people expressed significant anti-Semitic sentiments. However, during the Holocaust times, some bright spots in this history also do exist. There were some interventions to rescue the Jews. Now, in period from the 16th of July to the 3rd of August in 1940, the Dutch honorary consul Jans Warsdendik is he was basically living in Kaunas, and he provided over 2,200 Jews with an official third destination to Curacao, a Caribbean island and a Dutch colony that required no entry visa, or to Suriname, basically, another country that the Jewish population could flee from Lithuania at that point. Now, honestly, I have never heard about this guy, and obviously, he was not Lithuanian. He was of a Dutch descent, I believe. Now, I've heard about another guy, and this guy is literally one of my favorite historic figures of all time. A Japanese government official, Chune Sugihara, who served as vice consul for the Japanese Empire also in Kona. So basically, they were part of Axis at that point. They were not part of the good guys. They were part of the Italian, German, Japanese faction called the Axis that were, quote unquote, the bad guys, pretty much. So this guy, Sukihara, actually lived in my city in Kaunas, and during the Second World War, Sukihara helped around 6,000 Jews flee Europe by ensuring transit visas to them so that they could travel through Japanese territory. Now, he was risking his job, his family, his own life, his family lives. Basically, this man, Tsukihara, was risking everything. But, he is a complete hero in my opinion. He's definitely one of the bright spots of my city, because my city has only like dark history. It's only like dark. Nothing good has ever happened in Kaunas. Like, let's face it. But Tsukihara, this Japanese man, is a real legend here. At least for me personally, he's definitely one of my favorite historic figures of all time. And I definitely am really happy that this guy existed. And now, because of him, 6,000 Jews managed to escape the Holocaust in Lithuania, and their families are now living on, and probably doing some great stuff. So definitely, really, a really respectable guy, Chunye Sugihara. So that's pretty much the historic background of, Jews in Lithuania. I actually want to talk a little bit about the cemetery. Let's bring it back to the cemetery. So the Kaunas municipality is supposed to be taking care of the cemetery, the one that I've been to, the abandoned one, in 2007, when a group of rabbis from Israel and the United States visited Kaunas. A serious scandal arose. Pretty much after visiting this particular abandoned cemetery, which was even in worse shape in 2007, believe it or not, the rabbis were shocked to see the vandals, shattered and overthrown. The whole cemetery, the monuments were painted, maybe like some Nazi stuff as well was painted on, the monuments. When the media announced the opinion of the shocked rabbis, actually the leaders of Kaunas immediately apologized to the local Jewish community for the destruction of these graves. They applied to the police for patrolling the cemetery to ensure, that no vandals could ever vandalize it again. Now, addressing the government, the then mayor Andrius Kupčinskas, which is a complete failure. This guy is a complete joke. Like, everyone in my city knows this guy is a complete joke. He stated, the old Jewish cemetery in Žaliakalnis was recognized by the state as being protected for public knowledge and use and for public respect. Decades after the closure of the cemetery, many monuments have been affected by the atmosphere and vandals, boiled and shattered. However, first of all, the cemetery should be comprehensively fixed and arranged in a good manner, and obviously nothing happened after this statement, because this Andrius Kupčinskas guy, I need to make an episode on this guy as well. He's a complete failure, he's a joke, he's a stupid ass guy. Now, a complex project for the management of this abandoned cemetery was actually commissioned, but it was never implemented. The project's proposal to collect the surviving monuments and build one monument from the graves, just to collect all of these monuments and then build one monument. I don't know how that would even work in the entire territory, make it more like centralized and just something that would have an easier upkeep, like a one big monument instead of all of these scattered around gravestones and things like that. Now, this idea attracted supporters as well as skeptics. I would actually argue that that's not a good idea, because you probably don't want to do that. I think there's definitely some things that you could do to the cemetery without actually having to bulldoze over all of the current monuments and building one big monument. I think that's a cheap way out, and I definitely think the local Jewish community, at least the majority of the local Jewish community, sees the situation the same way that I do. So currently, the abandoned Žaliakalnis Jewish cemetery has certain visiting times for the cemetery so that it would not get vandalized. It has security cameras all over the place, and it's sort of just left there. It's an awkward place for the city. It's definitely awkward because the city, municipality, the city officials, they don't really know what to do with it. They don't want to touch it. They're just sort of, once the re-elections of the mayor and, his council happens, they pretty much just sort of hope to leave it there and, hope that everyone just sort of forgets about it. And, everyone's focusing on building new infrastructure, and everyone's sort of forgetting about this particular cemetery. And I really feel like that's messed up in a way. Every time I go there, I think this place is just abandoned. Lithuania definitely has a very dark history. Lithuania has seriously one of the darkest histories ever. And it's just really sad to go there. It's really sad to walk there, to see all of the abandoned graves, to see that, no one's actually interested in doing anything about it. And actually, when I think about it, I don't even know what you can do about it, because the graves are in such a bad shape. I don't really know how you even restore them. So it's definitely just another monument of sadness in Lithuania, in Kaunas, and I just wanted to talk about it this week. So that's pretty much it, guys. I hope to see you on the next week's episode. I don't know what I'm going to be talking about next week. Thank you for joining me. I hope that, my messed up voice today because of the cold didn't, turn you off that much. And you will be joining me next week. So stay safe and, peace out.